Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to our final presentation. I'm Henry. This is Chris. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone that helped us make this project happen. We obviously couldn't do it on our own. Generally, the instructors, Tom, Cody, Billy, Jason, and Jeff, all did their part in the pit with us, answering our questions, helping us run down error messages, and just generally walking us through some programs we hadn't seen before. So on to Bondo. Several weeks ago, I was having lunch with a friend whose business associate was looking for a new way to aggregate bond inventory information. There are several methods out there for doing that right now, but they are cost prohibitive and they are very difficult to customize. And so from there, we actually sketched out right at that lunch what would eventually become our final project, Bondo, the portal to Bondala. The goal of the project was pretty straightforward, though the back-end programming was complicated and pretty time-consuming. We linked as many bond information and bond inventory databases together as possible in order to have a user-friendly portal that would take a set of user requests, send them out simultaneously to the databases, and return information concerning the selected bonds, availability, and pricing data. To accomplish this, we would need to create a file called a wrapper, which would contain all of the different database contacting information in what's called APIs, or Application Programming Interface. These APIs serve as the go-between between computers and databases, and are very common in aggregating websites such as Trivago, which is a travel website which connects the user with 300 different booking applications by having their APIs ping their counterparts' databases and then return all of the relevant information to the user almost instantaneously. They are able to do this with the APIs. It's very similar to what we have. They have 300. At the moment, we have around 7, although we have plans to build it out with at least 12 more. The core APIs in our wrapper include the bond databases for Exignite, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, Merrill Lynch, and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Now with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris, who's going to tell you a little bit about more how we did what we did. Chris?
Thank you, Henry. Over the last 5 weeks, Henry and I have worked towards making Bondo user-friendly and functional as possible. To do this, we utilized several major programming languages and libraries which work together to create a RESTful API that is powerful, efficient, and easily customizable. Our base language when building Bondo was Python, which we learned in Phase 1. We chose to focus our work around Python because it was what we were most familiar with and had been our primary language during our time here at Byte Academy. Python is a very powerful tool that is used every day for fintech, web applications, and more. It is prized for its plain syntax, which allows programmers to quickly determine the purpose of code as well as what could be altered to make the code cleaner and run faster. Within Python, we were able to utilize a web framework tool called Django, which we learned in Phase 2. Django is a URL-driven framework that allows users to control web applications via a web portal. We immediately recognized that one of the core benefits of using Django would allow us to test our connection to the SQLite 3 database before we got into heavier coding. This allowed us to test some of our early work before we got into any heavier coding. In addition, Django allowed us to work in a modified model view controller format, which we had gotten familiar during the first 2 phases. Finally, it sends out simple error messages, which can be found on Google, Stack Overflow, or through the help of one of our instructors. After we structured our site with templates, we were then able to weave in some JavaScript, and along with some HTML and CSS, which we also learned in Phase 2. These 3 make up the core technologies of the World Wide Web. Specifically for our purposes, it allowed the added functionality of buttons on the home screen, which transport the user across different search methods through click events. In addition to these 2 core languages, we also use several libraries such as Bootstrap, jQuery, and Mustache, which we learned through building our project. Now I'd like to tell you about bonds, and so you can get a better understanding of what our project does. A bond is a debt security similar to an IOU. Borrowers issue bonds to raise funds from investors willing to lend them money for a specified period of time. When you buy a bond, you are effectively lending to the issuer, which may be a government, municipality, or corporation. Fixed income investments generally pay a return on a set schedule, though the payments can vary. There are 6 important features to look for when you consider a bond. It would be the maturity, whether it is secure or unsecured, the liquidation preference, the tax status, coupon rate, and callability, and the yield. There are also risks to look out for when considering bonds: credit default risk, prepayment risk, and interest rate risk. Bonds also have a rating attached to them, and the 3 most common rating agencies that rate these are Moody's, Fitch, and S&P. Now I'd like to turn it over to Henry, who'd like to tell us more about the project and how it works.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome, Henry.
This is just a general overview of some Django. I'm going to keep it very short and simple. I just want to show you a little bit about how we were able to structure our product. First, we always start with the models. Now, the model within Django lives in the database, and it's how the database saves the information, whether it's the user information or the search information. For that reason, the model always has to be identical to the database. Now, the way you can keep them identical is by migrating the model over to the database. But every time you make a change to the model, you have to do that. So when you're making a Django application, it's always a good idea to build out the model as much as you can right away. That'll minimize your migrations later. But while it's possible, it is a little bit frustrating every time you get an error message that they're not in sync. As you can see here, there are 4 fields: the state, the QSIP, the description, and the spread. This is within the model and not the database. So if we were to add an extra field at the bottom, we would again have to make a migration so that when we save this search, the database knows exactly what to expect. Then we make a template. The template is scripted in HTML, and it's basically what you see on a website. It's the visual portion of the web app and will dictate the content and the positioning of all the fields. Unfortunately, Django doesn't know anything about templates and what to do with them, and for that reason, we need to make a URL, which is a path that will tell Django where to put the information. There are 4 basic parts to a Django URL. Obviously, the URL at the beginning, which you see before the open parentheses. It's pretty standard. It just indicates a URL entry. Then you have the R with the upper caret and then the $sign. This is called the regex, and it represents the beginning of a URL pattern. It also refers to the path, which is represented after the base HTML on the top of every browser. Next, we have the views.userCreate, if we're looking at the second one down. This basically tells the URL where we're looking. Views is the name of the file, and userCreate is the name of the function. Now, this particular function, as you might guess, creates the user. So all of its real functionality is to determine if the user input, the username and the password when they're creating a new user, is already in place. If it is, it will kick back an error message: this username has already been taken. And also, it is about the password. The password needs to be at least 8 characters. I think there has to be at least 1 numerical character and 1 uppercase. If that's not the case, again, it will kick it back and it will not let you continue until all the attributes are met. Finally, we assign it a name. This is so we can reference it later without referencing the entire URL. So you see name home, name user create. That now represents the entire URL string, and we can use it in our code. Once we have a URL and a template, we need the views. The views acts as the controller in the MVC, and it basically is where the logic happens. Now, the view's only real goal at this point is to take in a request and to send out a response. Now, the request is basically the user inputs. It's what information you put in that you would like to see and into the form that will send it back to you. The response, it doesn't really care what the response is. Either it can give you a valid response, and you can see, let me see right there, I guess there's no line numbers, but if form is valid. It's basically checking to see if your user input is a valid input. If it's not, it will return an error message. If it is, it will return the web page as you desire it. So this entire views function acts as more or less a junction. That what you put in comes in, and what is necessary to come out comes out, whether it's valid or invalid. Oh, next, I want to show you the actual app. Just a quick little demonstration to show you. Most of this is actually backend. As you can see, it looks like it's only 1 page. It's actually 5 different pages with the same thing being rendered on the top of each. Each search method, let's see here, is basically a different set of input, and it will retrieve a different set of output. So you see, the quick search is designed to respond with a solitary bond. You put in an exact unique identifier, which is only for 1 bond, so it will only ever kick back 1 specific thing that you're looking for. If you know exactly the QSIP or the symbol, it will work perfectly. If you're looking for something a little more broad, obviously the broad range will allow the user to sort by ratings from the 3 major ratings industries or servers, and also allow for multiple responses by having other fields such as the quantity, coupon, and price. Screen bonds allows you to search for a specific user, much like quick search. But in addition to quick search, it has other fields. So like if you had a very wide maturity dates, the same issuer might have several different bonds available. You could search for Apple, but for 40 years, and you see what comes up. And it will allow you to kind of see a company's issuance as a whole. Also, this is one of the options where it could kick back an error rate. If you have your coupon rates that are differing from what the company has available, it'll simply say that there is no information for that. Markets is the most broad. All this does is narrow down the bond selection by whether it's a primary market that is issued by the company that's actually looking for the capital, or in the secondary market, whereas people trade them back and forth much like equities or any other kind of commodity. Finally, we have characteristics. Characteristics. This allows specifically a portfolio manager to search for very, very specific bonds. Now this can really come into play if their client says that they only want bonds that are insured, or only want bonds that are callable or puttable. So it'll cut out literally everything that's not applicable and return everything that is. As a quick demonstration, we have already picked out a bond. It's Microsoft. It was issued in 2015. And we can search by any one of these search methods. So just to start off, I guess we could do get bond calculation. Now again, the identifier type, these are every major identifier type within bonds. QSIP, symbol, and Valorin seem to be the most popular, so we're going to go with that. And hit quick search. As you see, this is nothing that we programmed. This is simply our API hitting, I believe this one is the Xignite API system, and kicking back every part of valid information. We can change the search method, click again, and it changes the inputs. So I feel like, especially if you know what you're looking for, this is a really great tool. We're going to continue to build it out. We really hope to have at least 12 more APIs, and this is actually hopefully going to turn into a 5-week interview because this is actually a real-life application program, and I'm hoping to turn it into the company next Friday, and hopefully if they like it, there will be an employment opportunity. So thank you very much for being my beta testers. If you have any questions, please let us know, but thank you for coming.